This is day 4 of the August 92 7-day retreat at Springwater. Here's what I wrote down. Every time waiting in line for a meeting, there's this inner nervousness or mild anxiety. Why is that after all these years? Do I want something of you? I know I do in a way. Good things have come from meetings in the past, and I want that again. Also, I want to be worthy in your eyes. I want to be loved by you, appreciated. Also, I want to bring you something worthwhile. I want to please you, not disappoint you. All that and more is going on. Can you and I meet here together without wanting anything from each other? Without the old teacher-student relationship, the old parent-child relationship. A new identity has emerged about being here, and it began to feel like a weighty pressure around my neck. Walking down the driveway yesterday, it exploded, leaving nothing except a great relief. Why do we always want to be something that we can identify with? And in that, forget that we are much more than this small identity. I feel confused. I've always been interested, particularly in my previous Zen training, in who I am and in this one mind that the masters and the Buddha spoke about. But you seem to be talking mostly about our motives. I'm not so interested in all the psychological things. I want to find out who I am, who it is that is born and lives and dies. You don't seem to be interested in the idea of one mind or enlightenment. Why not? It sounds from your talk yesterday that moving away through wanting is bad, while being with what is good. So being with what is of value, while moving away is not. Or maybe, sometimes, moving away is of value, and being with what is not. Even though wanting seems to have a bad press here with you. I like that expression. In a presidential year. Even though wanting seems to have a bad press here with you, and the self also, the fact is, it got us here to this place. We wouldn't be here without having wanted to come here. And this was in a group, and somebody said, I wouldn't call coming here wanting. That is based on wanting. Rather, it's just a need. Like when you ache from bending over, you stretch. And you just do it. You ache from bending and you come here to stretch. When I find that I'm making myself be attentive, telling myself to look, be attentive, it makes me feel nauseous. Then I don't want to do it at all. And then at times, attention happens on its own easily. This is the wealth of material. We have enough for the rest of the week, so it seems, but sometimes it all sort of comes together. Let me see. Oh, yeah. This is what I want to start out with. How we listen to what is said. All of us, including the one who happens to talk during this 7-day retreat. How do we listen? It seems such an immensely difficult thing to be in the same state of mind as the one who's speaking, and therefore hear what he, she means in the way it is meant. And what he or she says, to hear it the way it is meant. And this is by no means the first time. It happens all the time that what is said, let's take it about wanting, sounds as though we shouldn't want. There shouldn't be wanting. How can we best get rid of it, overcome it, be done with it, be free of wanting? And that's not what is meant in talking about wanting. Yesterday we were going at great detail into the pleasurable aspect of it, the almost addictive aspect of wanting more pleasure. It doesn't go through conscious decision. We cited the experiments with rats that press the lever to get pleasurable experiences in the body. That's what we want, pleasure. This body, this organism craves it. Pleasurable experiences, and tries to avoid unpleasurable, painful ones. It's a given. It's nothing we can say we want to get rid of it, we should overcome it, it's bad. This is not what I'm interested in, to say what's good and bad, and now let's all rally and go after the good, avoid the bad. And yet this is how we are conditioned to hear things, to be told things from a seat which has a position in front of people. Maybe it's rings remembrances of sermons from pulpits about what's sinful and what's good in the eyes of God. All of that plays in there. Ancient stuff. And it has not much or any precedence to hear somebody say, let's just look at this and see how it's operating, what it does, its side effects, its main effects, its after effects. To become intimate with what goes on within ourselves in a non-judgmental way. And what has come up in this retreat particularly, in other retreats it's other things, is wanting. People beginning to observe wanting and finding that there's wanting at every moment. That doesn't mean it's bad. Let's be intimate with it. Feel it, see it, listen to it. Follow it through attentively without judgment. Is that possible? And can one hear what is said in this way? That it is an open invitation to look together or alone, one-on-one, small groups, big groups, to look together at what is wanting. Not whether it's good or bad. We will spend eons and will never come to an agreement, because what's good for one is bad for another, on a relative scale, or in a relative way. But we can all watch it, and we may find a lot of similarity among each other. Even though I'm not saying let's watch wanting so that we feel very similar. But it's possible to watch it together because similar things go on in all of us. And one of them is seemingly endless wanting. I didn't even name much the object. Yesterday I talked about pleasure. The objects vary from place to place, time to time, culture to culture, person to person. But wanting remains. One of the things we said yesterday, I don't recall the exact formulation, but that doesn't matter. We can look at it again and formulate it newly. That in watching wanting, and I'm not now talking theoretically, hypothetically, but I'm watching wanting in myself, and I have watched it, and can recall also the times that it has been watched and what has been found. In watching wanting, it reveals itself as a movement, a physical agitation. Maybe that word is too strong. A movement. And that movement is partly the movement of thought toward something that is imagined to be desirable, pleasurable, helpful, aggrandizing, whatever. Thought moving toward something imagined, and imagining oneself in that scenario, in that having something, somebody, sex, food, pleasure, travel, a better house, another retreat, maybe 10 days or 3 months. It's a movement, isn't it? And the body, thought doesn't just move there on its own, whatever thought is, some electrochemical movement from synapse to synapse. It also elicits or triggers what has been recently called neuropeptides, all kinds of chemicals in the body, which either bring pleasurable sensations or anxious or angry sensations, fearful ones. It's also movement. If it's a fearful thought releasing fearful chemicals, the bowels want to move. So, I find in watching, wanting, that it is either a very palpable, gross movement or a very subtle movement toward something. I'm using the word toward cautiously because it happens here in this brain and body, not going any place, but the movement of thought toward something, maybe because it is accompanied by physical movements in muscles and glands and organs. Therefore, it is felt as a movement toward something. Or, as we said yesterday, away from something. Is it a movement away from something? And I used to speak almost solely in questions at the beginning. And people got sick and tired of it. They said, can't you say one single statement? You always have to only ask questions. So I've been accommodating, saying more things, but it doesn't mean this is what you have to believe or learn by heart or say to others. It's always, whatever is said is open to questioning And of course we can pick apart everything intellectually, but the great challenge is to look directly whether what is said is actually so, what it really points to in actuality. And can one capture that actuality through listening and looking here, now, or whenever what is being talked about, anger or jealousy, appears. And then we also say at times, I don't know whether it was in yesterday's talk, that there is a state of awareness, attention, openness, in which there is no movement toward or away. And it is so because thought is quiet or relatively quiet. It's not a superhuman state that happens to extraordinary people. Somebody just this morning told me, indeed, the mind has slowed down. At times there are no thoughts. And it's much, much simpler to see what is. Because particularly this whole complex inner network of me-ness, my needs, my remembrances, my anticipations, my images, when that is quiet, there's an enormous amount of clear space to look, to see, not with an effort or a command, but things reveal themselves, appear, are there, openly, undisguised. And in that state, if a thought comes up, and maybe it's so fast, thought is so fast, and the transmission from thought to chemical is so fast that one thought and an anxious twinge, wherever one's anxious twinges happen for different people in different places. Here, solar plexus, stomach, intestines, head, are all over. When that happens, it's possible to notice a shrinking of the space, of the openness of being, of perception, to now a narrow concern, worry, more thoughts, more fear, or more anger. Maybe awareness isn't totally gone. That's why it's possible to see how anger is sustained by more thoughts about what she or he did to me, the nerve of him, the insensitivity, and always me, always picking on me. Such sentences and statements, we've called them in the past headlines or punchlines. They punch this whole organism into pain or agony, agitation. This is observable because attention isn't totally gone. Awareness isn't totally shut out, which it is at times. Not always there. So now let's come to this question. I found that really a challenging question yesterday in a group. Is it of value? It seems to be of value, I don't quite know how it was said, to have this open space. No, it wasn't talked about the open. To be with what is of value, and moving away is not of value. But sometimes moving away is of value, and then being with what is not of value. And here and there before, and in reading other authors, this concept of value has cropped up, and I've never really dealt with it. This was a challenge to look at it a little bit more closely, what is involved with this, because there's definitely value in things for us. It's because I value a week at Springwater that I make arrangements in my head. I have to plan it out. I want to go there because it's of value to me. The value being what I remember that it did for me in the past, or what I anticipate it will do for me. The value assigned by other people. The value I garner from a book about it, etc. Or at a moment of anxiety, fear, narrowness, caught upness, feeling imprisoned, I would value going out and seeing a movie. That seems of great value to get out of this hole that I feel myself in. So remembering what a movie has done in the past, sort of been uplifting, or most movies these days I don't find uplifting, but at least they're exciting and too much for me most of the time. But people saying it makes me feel alive or gives me rushes or something. So this becomes of value. So therefore, staying with the fear or anxiety has no value at this moment that I want to get out. In all of what I looked at, and please let's discuss it more in groups or alone, I find that it's very important for me, with my likes and dislikes, to be in there, to assign value. I need to be there to know what's valuable and what's not valuable. And that changes depending on my moods and states of being. Peaceful or agitated, out for excitement or wanting quiet, wanting to sleep. The bed at times is of the greatest value. So I'm in there with my whole value system. Myself being the greatest value, really. It comes right down to it, doesn't it? Me. I'm of great value to myself. I'm not putting it that way consciously, but it's a fact. Because usually it's me first, or what I'm identified with. As one person said, my tendrils are going all over the world. And if one of them is attacked or stepped on or flattered, I feel it. And what I feel is the pouring out of chemicals that either feel pleasurable, energizing, or the opposite, de-energizing, deflating, depressing. So, for assigning value, there has to be me with my past experiences, my cultural background and associations, class, so all of that, religion, all of that assigns value, hierarchies of value, one higher than the other, but that may shift. Now, is this state that I was just trying to describe before, of openness, no feeling of separation, the network of me in abeyance, quiet, not energized, is that of value? And of greater value than a narrow state of self-centeredness? I feel, and looking at it right now, that this term does not quite apply, because the me is not on center stage, assigning value. It's quiet, and therefore the field is open. The breeze is there. The morning dove is heard, and other birds, and the breathing is there, and here and there someone moving, it's all there, with no sense of separation or isolation or division or conflict. Now, if you think about that, or put it down on paper, or talk about it, becomes a very valuable thing to the mind that wants. Is that right? But in not thinking about it, just being that, and the breeze and the rustling trees, why would I say this is of value? It's just what it is. And if I became anxious right now over something, heard about an accident, my husband or children hurt or dead, then there would be probably a very narrow channel of, I don't know what there would be. Because sometimes in the face of emergency, the mind opens up to be clear about a right action. Somebody talked about in terms of war, bringing heightened awareness. But whatever may trigger the mind to awaken this whole network of me-ness, I-ness, selfness, then this would be gone, would not be there. And then, remembering it, does one say, oh, I want that again, because that becomes a value, the remembrance in the presence of me being now in misery or in narrowness. And maybe here we can come to the question of one person saying, why do you talk so much about motives and psychological stuff? I'm not interested in that. I don't come here to hear that. I want to find out who I am, what I am. I'm born, live and die. What is this me, or who am I to do that? To whom this happens? Also, you don't talk about the one mind. Well, I just did, actually. I just did. And I do at times. But I don't talk about it as an idea of value. Enlightenment as a concept of great value to strive after. That I don't do. And why not? Because I rather look at what it does to set up a concept or idea of value and then wanting to get that. This is what I'm interested in, looking at that. The wanting and how it needs ideals to get the energies to strive after it, and how narrow the channel, which is only possible to see once an opening happens. Then one can also see the narrowness of our wanting channels. And that happens to human beings the world over, whether they have spiritual training or not. This mind opens up suddenly and sees the absurdity of its identities, or how it takes something for real and whole, which is just a part, mostly made up of thought and memory. So if you want to find out, if I want to find out who I am, do I think about being one mind, or already being, which is taught in Zen Buddhist centers, that already as we sit here, we are enlightened Buddhas, only we don't know it? It's a marvelous concept and idea which can release tremendous chemicals throughout the body, particularly when one feels depressed, how miserable one is, then to think, actually, I'm a Buddha. I rather want to look at those mechanisms when they happen, but not postulate what I am, but find out from moment to moment what is going on in this body-mind, which happens to be physical, electrochemical, and psychological, social, the whole thing. We are all of that as we live from moment to moment. We can't look at the one mind. It's impossible to look at wholeness. This can only manifest here. Can't be seen. It can be talked about, but then it's just an idea. Can you see that? Wholeness, undividedness, of course we can say a few words about it, but it is not something to look at. It manifests, it emerges, it comes, there it is. But we can look at the conditioned mind, wanting, as we did before, the movement of thought towards something and the accompaniment of the whole body to that thought, of moving toward revenge or toward pleasure, toward building. So, wanting is not bad press, it's not the boogeyman or boogie woman. It's something to examine. And when does wanting have a place in getting here? Building this building. We wanted to have a building in the country. Not all of us, but some of us. To do this work, wanted to have people. That people have the opportunity to walk through meadows and woods and hear running waters was one of the wantings. We had a big sheet of wanting, and the sound of running water was one of them. Lots of exposure to the outside, even though we're inside. We have many, many months of cold winter. And one time we had a sort of a brainstorming session, and everybody just said in words and spurts what we wanted. And through this wanting, and people wanting to help, because it was of value to them and to us, this thing came into being. And now, people wanting to come here and arriving here and sitting here right now, can we look at wanting? Not and careful about the conditioned mind making the bad thing out of wanting. Observing that and learning about it. We can learn about everything. Anything that is observed is also learning about it. Becoming wise. About what's happening. If it is observed non-judgmentally, not through assigning badness and goodness, then we can't observe. We can't observe a child. We already think he's bad. Can't really be with him or her when we already have an idea what he's like. Likewise an adult. But it's the hardest thing. It's so quick. The programs of assigning to opposite categories is so strong that we can't even hear something except for immediately assigning what is heard into categories. It's interesting discovery, isn't it? And if we discover it, there's a real joy. If it's really discovered, not just intellectually understood, which we're not maligning, incidentally. Intellectual understanding is important. But when something is directly seen as it happens, usually the response is a joy and energy about seeing something that is so true, even if it is something that's painful. Painful because thought says it's bad. No, not just that. Jealousy or anger are painful, aren't they? We don't have to call it bad. It's painful, discomforting. It's an interesting story. It just comes to mind, so I'll say it. We used to go to Ojai to hear Krishnamurti. My husband and I, we never met him personally, but we listened to his talks. And we became friends with a woman who used to live in New York City with her husband, and they had moved to Ojai to be there, hear the talks. And she's an older lady, they were both retired. And I asked her, how come you moved? Quite a move from New York City to Ojai. And she said, it all happened like this. I heard a talk, Madison Square Gardens or wherever he was talking. And I was deeply touched by the talk, And afterwards, I saw him quite close, and he was talking to a woman. Quite an involved conversation, and I felt jealousy rearing up throughout my whole body. And I saw it. And I realized I got to be near this man. Not to be near him, but to understand more about myself. So here, you would say, well, seeing jealousy about oneself, what a miserable thing to see. But it was a discovery, it was a direct seeing, and that was the driving force, the powerful thing. To see something clearly, one can say that that's the truth. Not that to live in jealousy is to live in truth, but to live in seeing is true. And that seeing does not happen if one is already set against jealousy, but maybe she was set against it. Probably was. That much more the surprise at the joy of discovering something, even though it's not considered to be a good thing. So, we don't talk about the one mind as the task here to be discovered or to become enlightened, because most of us have gone through this, trying to get there, and have found the path narrow and full of ambition and anxiety, comparison, and not shedding light upon itself. But can we look and listen to the wind in the trees out of an open mind that is not divided to you and me and him and her and old and young and black and white? It's the same listening. And if there's a strong feeling, I am the listener here, I feel separate, I feel isolated. What is that? This is thoughts and ideas and feelings about me. Who I am, good at it, bad at it, not as good as so-and-so. All of this makes up the me, who I am in my daily life without the space of listening. See, the question is already a trick question. Who am I? I use the two. Who is the wanter? Who is the experiencer? It's better to say what is wanting, what is experiencing, or what is controlling. Then the mind isn't already set to find some entity there, a little homunculus within, a homuncula. But if one is convinced there is something like this, a soul entity or so, then by all means try to find it. Look for it, try to find it. And in looking and not being dissuaded by anybody who says there isn't any, because why should you believe anybody? Person may be deceiving you, trying to get you into the fold of no soul. So there was this story, it was a good story, it was read to us at the Zen Center about this Zen master Basui. His father died and the boy was 7 years old when the funeral took place, and there were all these delicious cakes on the altar, And the boy said, "For whom are those cakes?" And the priest said, "They are for your father." And he said, "My father's dead." He said, "But they're for the soul of your father." And we're told the reasoning of this boy went, if he has a soul, I've got one too. Where is it? I got to find it. No one could dissuade him from trying to find the soul. And the more he looked, the emptier it got inside. First, when we look inside, we find a lot. And what we find is words and ideas and images and feelings and emotion, all the whole network. That's what we find at first. But in looking, questioning beyond this, wondering, the soul is not a word. That doesn't make sense, does it? It must supposed to be much more. It becomes emptier and emptier and more spacious. I've never found anything inside. There's no inside. There's the trees moving and making this incredible sound. Is that inside? Is that outside? And the word "who's hearing it" does not trick me anymore. It's just... We will end here for today.